everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's focus will be Chapters 1, Data Management, and Chapter 2, Data Ethics. The first thing is the official guidance is that 60% of the content on the CDMP Fundamentals exam comes directly from the book. Now, based on the experience of myself and my team members, we think it's actually closer to about 80% of the questions that are coming straight from the big blue monster. That's great news for you guys as you're getting ready, because it actually means the test is probably a little bit easier than the official guidance indicates. So just keep in mind that the concepts on the test, according to us, it's about 10%. They use familiar concepts that are from the book, but they might use different language. So they will require some critical thinking in order to answer. And then there's going to be another 10% of the questions that are kind of more recent, or they are scenario-based questions. They require extrapolation based on your experience as a practitioner in order to answer them. So essentially, these are requiring applying the knowledge of the DMBOK to a new situation, or requiring outside knowledge that you would gain through your work or your reading or keeping up with current events and data management. So one thing I will say is this breakdown is for the fundamentals exam. If you are thinking about progressing to attain your CDMP practitioner or your CDMP master level, the ratio is flipped on the specialist exams that are required for those levels. So about 80% of the questions are the more difficult ones that might not be directly in the book, but do require extrapolation or using your outside knowledge to answer them. So the specialist exams are definitely in a different degree of difficulty. During the test, as you probably know, it's an open book exam. We typically recommend that people take the exam using their ebook rather than using a physical book. That is because when you have the ebook, you can use Control F, which is very, very helpful. There is no similar affordance when you have the physical book. The index probably is not that great. It's not super complete. It is totally possible to get a master level pass with the physical book, but it's just going to be a little bit harder. You're going to need to be very diligent with using sticky notes and highlighting and taking notes in your copy of the physical book. Now, you can do the same if you have a copy of the ebook. Definitely still take notes, still annotate, and all of that is actually encouraged by DAMA. That being said, DAMA does not allow you to have more than one iteration of book as you're taking this test. So what that means is you can use either the ebook DMBOK, the physical book DMBOK, some other random book, which I don't recommend, or your notes. You cannot use separate notes, like notes written in a notebook, and also use your book. But if you have notes in the book, that is acceptable. So I'm not sure why they have this rule, but that is the rule currently. I feel like they really want you to buy the DMBOK, and that's why maybe they have this rule. But anyway, we recommend people to move some of their annotations into the ebook. Another consideration is when you're taking the exam, they ask that you use the Chrome browser on either a laptop or a desktop computer. And then when you are taking the exam, you'll need to have the Honor Lock Chrome extension downloaded. Now, this might be a problem for those of you that are trying to use a corporate laptop for this, because sometimes there's extra privileges that might be required to download a plugin. You'll probably want to take the exam on a personal computer so that you can ensure that you have the extension downloaded. The Honor Lock extension, that's the proctor. So it's actually the test is AI proctored. So you can take it at any time of day or night. Whenever you feel ready, you just take the exam, and it essentially records you and your environment to make sure that you're not cheating somehow. So what Honor Lock does is it locks down your browser, so you can only access the one window on which you're taking the exam. You can't, for example, have a dual monitor, which is what I have right now. If you see me looking over here, you can't do that during the exam. So that's why they ask that you put the ebook on a separate device. Going back to my previous litany of advice around taking notes in your device, it's really hard to then transfer the book once you put all your notes in. Your notes typically get deleted when you do shift your book between devices because of the DRM that DAMA has placed on the book. So just keep that in mind. You're going to need to have one device with the book and one device with your exam. And unfortunately, if you do not currently have the ebook, I don't have any awesome, great advice about how to get it. The best thing is to purchase it from the publisher, which is Technics Pub. This is what the website looks like where you can buy the ebook directly from DAMA. All right, I'm going to keep going a little bit. So certification levels. If we are taking the Certified Fundamentals exam, which is the exam that I will be helping you prepare for today, then if we pass that exam, the certification that is earned is called the CDMP Associate. In order to attain the CDMP practitioner or the master, you have to get a certain score on the fundamentals exam, and then you need to take 2 additional exams, the specialist exams. So for the CDMP practitioner, which is the center tier, you'll need to pass all 3 exams, so the fundamentals and the 2 specialist exams with a score of at least 70. And then for the master, you need to pass all 3 exams with a score of at least 80. And they'll also do an experience review only for that master level. You need to have at least 10 years of experience, and you have to wait for them to review your resume. There's a little bit of an additional fee for that. I believe it's $50 US dollars. And then eventually, once they look at your resume, then they will confirm that you are a master level accredited individual, which is very exciting because there's only a handful of those in the world. But yeah, attaining the practitioner or the CDMP associate, these industry levels, the industry requirements are recommendations, not requirements. So don't get concerned about that. If you want to pursue practitioner, then I encourage you to go ahead and do that. Even if you're new to the field, even if you don't have those 10 years or 2 years of industry experience that are recommended. And then one other thing about the CDMP Master is they do like to see experience in data, but any kind of technology experience also counts. So if you were a software engineer for 5 years and then you switched over and you worked in data for 5 years, that would count total for 10 years. They also said, like, if you did the IT help desk in college, that can count towards your technology experience. So they are somewhat liberal with how they count that 10 years, but it's kind of up to DAMA's discretion at the end of the day, how they provide that accreditation. Okay, if you pass the fundamentals exam with a 70, then you are on track to get the practitioner level. So if you take then the 2 specialist exams and you also pass those with a 70 or greater, then you would get practitioner. If you wanted to then get master, then you would need to retake the exams until you got that 80% or above on all 3. One piece of good news for you guys is if you do end up wanting to do a retake for any reason, whether you didn't pass, like you got less than a 60, or whether you just didn't attain your goal score, the retake fee is $211. So you do save about a third relative to the full cost of the exam. In terms of taking the 3 exams, you have to take them within 3 years. Don't be like me. I took fundamentals. I let it lapse. I waited more than 3 years. Then I was like, oh, I want to be a CDMP practitioner. So then I had to take all 3 exams again. I took fundamentals and then I took the 2 specialist exams. So don't do that. Take them all kind of within, I would say, the reasonable amount of time would be 3 months. That would be a good duration because studying for the fundamentals exam, once you've taken that, then it actually, of course, helps you prepare for the specialist exams. They have some overlap in terms of the questions, but definitely the content. I will say if you are interested in the data governance specialist exam, that one is most closely aligned to the fundamentals exam. So definitely take that one fairly close afterwards versus all the other specialist exams are pretty narrow. The difference about data governance is it covers more chapters. Just really quickly, there's 14 chapters that are tested on the CDMP fundamentals exam. The last 3 chapters of the book are not tested on the fundamentals exam. They are much more implementation oriented versus the 14 chapters, which are represented in the DAMA wheel. Those are your essential knowledge areas. And you'll also notice if you're looking here at the list of the 14 chapters that the percentage that is represented on the exam is highly disparate. It's a 100-question exam. So the percentages here, that's like the approximate number of questions that you would get, right? So you might see 11-ish questions on data governance and 11-ish questions on data quality, and you might see 2-ish questions on data management and data ethics. So as you're studying, you obviously want to factor that into your approach and make sure that you're spending a lot more time on these more important chapters because you'll see more of them on the exam. And here it's just a pink square so you can see which chapters you need to focus on. Okay, so that was the speed run of our general intro to the CDMP exam. Now we're going to talk a little bit about chapters 1 and 2, but we're not going to talk a ton about them because, again, they are each only 2% of the CDMP exam. But I do want to give you guys a flavor of these chapters. I would encourage you not to skip them all together because, of course, the data management chapter is a great introduction to the other domains. It's kind of like extended table of contents where it's introducing the essential concepts and laying out how the domains work together. And then, of course, data ethics. It's near and dear to my heart. I think it's something that impacts all of us as practitioners, and it's just good to learn about it, even though, unfortunately, it's not a highly represented topic on the test. Okay, for data management, the first thing you need to understand is the definition, which is the kind of thing that you might see a question about on the exam. Data management refers to the development, execution, and supervision of plans, policies, programs, and practices that deliver, control, protect, and enhance the value of data and information assets throughout their lifecycle. One thing to note for the CDMP is that DAMA considers data and information to be slightly synonymous. You might get concept-based questions, definition-based questions that just ask you something simple like, can you select the correct definition out of the 5 options? Okay, next topic that I wanted to discuss is what is data? Again, chapter 1 is a great place to start because it includes a lot of this fundamental information. So the definition of data is a representation of a fact. Data is both an interpretation of the object that it represents and an object that must be interpreted. And just to highlight this, I think one of my favorite things of the first chapter is the kind of semi-paradoxical statements about the nature of data. Again, this one here is kind of a tautology or chiasmus where it's both the interpretation of the object and an object that must be interpreted. All that to say, there's definitely some head scratchers in this chapter, which are kind of thought-provoking for those of us that work with data. Okay, characteristics of data. So it may or may not be truthful or, I guess, accurate, and it must have context to be meaningful. So as you probably are aware, data without context has essentially no value. If you don't have an understanding of what the information relates to, just having a spreadsheet of ones and zeros doesn't really help you at all. So context is key. Accuracy is also very important. And then the final thing is data can be used to create products, share information, create knowledge, and support organizational success. So chapter 1 and also chapter 3, the data quality chapter, they both emphasize the importance of data valuation, which is thinking through quantifying the value of data as an asset. So I think that's a very important subdomain, I suppose, of data management and data governance. Okay, so just taking a quick peek at this infamous DAMA wheel. This is probably the most popular diagram to come out of DAMA. And it shows a lot of the knowledge areas, not all 14, but many of them kind of arrayed around data governance. So this wheel represents how data governance is integral to all the other data management domains and how it supports all the knowledge areas. So that is some very, very quick intro to chapter 1. In terms of studying, I would focus on the frameworks that are included alongside the DAMA wheel. So you have the Aiken pyramid, and a couple others that show various perspectives on how data management is a unique domain. That's, I think, one of the key purposes of DAMA International as an organization is to highlight the data management field and carve it out separately from business operations or information technology management and say data management is special and it deserves its own focus. And that kind of knowledge can also be used to answer questions where you might see like, oh, what is IT's responsibility in a project? Or an answer choice that kind of highlights maybe like IT playing a really significant role in a data project. And keep in mind, DAMA's focus is carving out data management as separate from IT. So if you see a question with IT in it and it's not just consulted or supporting, then, that answer choice, if it's saying IT is supposed to be in charge, it's likely to be the wrong answer. Yeah, so hopefully that helps you get thinking about why chapter 1 is important, how it puts forward the purpose of the data management discipline, and then different framework looking at that purpose. Okay, now we're just going to do a really quick speed run of chapter 2. So chapter 2 is data handling ethics. Like I said, it's 2% of the content on the fundamentals exam. However, if you are thinking about doing data governance as your specialist exam, I would also pay attention to this chapter because it comes up pretty heavily in that data governance specialist exam content. So data handling ethics refers to the practice of procuring, storing, managing, interpreting, analyzing, applying, and disposing of data in ways that align with ethical principles, including the potential impact on people and organizations. So this is basically saying we're going to act ethically using data throughout the data lifecycle, which is an important aspect of chapter 1 I would also encourage you to look at. So according to the DMBOK, the principles of data ethics stem from the Belmont principles. The Belmont report came out of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It was published in 1978. And there are 3 main aspects or principles which were applied to medical research in the context of the report, but are also very crucial for data gathering and data handling. So those 3 principles are respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. So respect for persons refers to treating individuals with dignity and autonomy, providing extra protections for those with limited capacity for decision-making, and using personal data only with valid informed consent. So that's respect for persons. The next one is beneficence, which is to do no harm in data collection or use, to maximize benefits while minimizing risks and avoiding unnecessary data invasiveness. And then the final principle is justice. So that's treating people equitably in data-driven decisions, preventing bias and unfair outcomes, and examining how algorithms may reinforce inequality. So that is just one aspect that you might see a question on when you get into the data ethics portion of the test. Anyway, it's just a nice and important thing to think about as a data practitioner. So that's all I have in terms of our really quick intro to these two chapters.